don't know why it is, but this is always one of the hardest Sundays for me to preach each year. And I think part of it is that it comes up every year. And so there's always that part of me that wants to say something new that I haven't said before. But I think the other piece of it is that I can see myself very easily in the shoes of Peter and James and John. Okay, Jesus, just give me something to do. Just, okay, it's good that I'm here so that I can go and I can be a part of this task. And again, I think we were talking a little bit last week about that desire to continually do and not just be and be present sometimes in that moment. And I think the other piece of it is the church has wrestled with using its, the best words it can for generation after generation after generation to try and describe who Jesus is and what Jesus means. And those words are the best that we have, but they're never quite enough. They never really capture all of who Jesus is. And, whether we go back to words like you would find in the creeds, for example, the Nicene Creed, the best minds of the 4th century gathering together, and they're going to talk about, well, who is this Jesus? And so they come up with true God of true God, light of light, and begotten, not made, of one being with the Father. And all those words are great, and they're great philosophical ways of trying to talk about who Jesus is, but ultimately, I think I get called back again and again on a thing like this to say, but listen to him. Walk behind him. Have your eyes open. I do think in a certain respect, when we start to try to talk about, well, how do we know what God is like, there is that element that we get from just looking around us, of being aware of the ways in which God is present in the midst of our world. I mean, the Psalm today, the mighty one, God, the Lord, speaks and summons the earth from its rising of the sun to its setting, from Psalm 50. I do think, a couple weeks ago, when we had the blood moon, where you had the eclipse of the moon going into the earth shadow and everything else like that, and you had this time where I was watching, and it was just really beautiful. And the next morning I got up and I was running, and it happened to be running into a really stunning sunrise. And again, those two kind of moments where, it's caused me to just stop and pay attention, where, again, I just take everything around me for granted so often. I do think that there are signs of God all throughout the earth around us, but I think sometimes, if you're like me, you're just so focused on what you're doing and where you're going that you miss it. I think that's part of it. I mean, I do think that also there are times where you have people who come into your life that show you a little bit of what God is and a little bit of what God is like. I mean, I do think there are these holy people. That was certainly the case for Elijah and Elisha. So we have the story from our Old Testament reading in 2 Kings where Elijah is getting taken up into heaven, and Elisha doesn't want him to leave. And I do think that we have those places, those people, and those who show us a little bit of what God is like. And as we walk with them in life, we don't want them to leave. We want them to stay with us forever, and they never do. That we never get that privilege. But I do think that is a place where sometimes God meets us is through another person. And maybe and I certainly have had these people, those wise saints in the midst of life, who just seem to be able to see a little bit more, to listen a little bit deeper, to walk a little bit more faithfully. And ultimately, for us as Christians, and especially for us as Lutherans, but all Christians, we come back to Jesus. That this is where we come to know what God is like. And all throughout all the Gospels, it is this journey behind Jesus where the disciples slowly but surely begin to ask that question, but who is this? And what does he mean? And so, one of the things about this week is we've jumped 8 chapters in the story. So we've jumped from the very beginning of the story in chapter 1 all the way to chapter 9, and we're going to jump back to chapter 1 next week and go even earlier in the story. That's just the way that when you have the things that rotate with the season, it goes. And so we've missed all this time in the story where the disciples are following behind Jesus and they're seeing things and they don't know how to make sense of it, whether he's walking on water, whether he's feeding 5,000, whether he is healing the sick or casting out demons. We've seen a very little bit of that in the readings, and we'll see more of that. But they've already been wondering, well, who is this Jesus? And we as hearers got to experience a little bit of this because we got to see what nobody else got to see when Jesus was baptized. That, here was this scene where Jesus comes up out of the water and the Spirit descends on him and the voice comes, "This is my beloved, with whom I am well pleased. This is my Son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased." And so, we get to see a little bit more than even what Jesus' disciples got to see at that point. But then we also got to hear what they didn't get to hear about Jesus going off into the wilderness and being tempted. And those two scenes do connect in with the scene for today of where Jesus is up on the mountain and he's transfigured and the voice comes, "This is my beloved. Listen to him." I do sometimes think a picture can be worth 1,000 words, even if you don't really know how to describe it. I love this picture. This is one of the pictures that came up as I was looking for images on Transfiguration. It's a modern piece. I love the colors of it. I love kind of the vibrancy of it. But I'll be the first to admit, I don't know exactly what's going on here. And I think that's sometimes okay to be able to say that, there is something of a mystery in this. There is something that is, I can just look at it and I can say, this is beautiful. Even if I don't understand all of it, I can sit there and actually, a picture that is real clear. And I love, a picture that you can look at and it looks like it's taken from a camera. I love an artist that can do that. I think that's wonderful. But I'll look at that and I'll appreciate it for about 10 to 15 seconds and I'll move on to the next image. But something I don't understand, but something that grabs me anyway, something that's got a mystery in it, I'll sit there and I'll just watch it and I'll look at it and I'll try and I'll puzzle at it. And I think part of this is something that happens in the midst of this time of transfiguration. Jesus goes up the mountain. He's there with Moses and Elijah. The disciples, again, it's good for us to be here. We have something we can do. We can go and we can create booths for you and Elijah and Moses. We can make a place for you to stay. We have a task that we can do. And again, they get focused in on what they're supposed to do. They're terrified. And, the way Mark tells it, and Mark's ambiguous. Mark likes to be ambiguous, but Mark is ambiguous to whether, it's whether it's the disciples who don't know what to say or whether Jesus is looking at them and sees them in terror and doesn't know what to say. And in either case, the voice comes. "This is my Son, the beloved. Listen to him." Sometimes I get so caught up in wanting to explain everything. Sometimes I get so caught up in wanting to understand and put everything together and make everything make sense. Sometimes I get so caught up in that I forget that this is all really something that is at some level a mystery. At a certain point, faith says, "I don't understand, but I trust." And I do believe that's a part of what this story is. Peter and James and John, they're there. They don't know exactly what to do. They don't know exactly what to say. That the voice has to come from the cloud that overwhelms them and speak in the midst of their terror and say, "This is my Son, listen to him." And they do. And they follow. And they journey. And they continue at various points to misunderstand, and they continue at various points to get it wrong, and yet they go anyway. You know, we're going to celebrate later this week on Wednesday. We're going to celebrate Ash Wednesday, where we remember that we're not gods, that we are mortal, that our lives are but a span of breath. You know, the very short period of time. We come and we go. That we do not live forever. That we don't understand everything. That we can't grasp everything. And I think that that's part of that life of faith, is being able to come to grips with the reality of, I don't understand all of this, but I can see that it's beautiful. I can see that, you know, even when I don't understand, I can still continue to follow. Even at the times where I can understand that, you know, I've got my blinders on and I don't see everything that's going on. I miss way too many sunrises and way too many sunsets and way too many times where, you know, there's beauty around me and I just miss it. There are too many times where, you know, I try to fit God into my own, you know, my own little box, or my own sense of understanding, or my own, the limits that I can put on it with my words. And I forget that, you know, the reality is that I'm dust. In the dust I shall return, and God is not. That God is the one who can take dust and breathe into it and make it live. And so I think part of this this week is that reminder. Yes, I'm dealing with things that are holy, that are beyond my comprehension, that are beautiful, beyond my ability to express with words, that do cause me to sit there and wonder and wait. And I use the best words that I have. I use the best ways that I can understand. I use the best of what I am to try and give voice to that. But ultimately, it comes down to me, there are those times where I need to stop, where I need to listen, where I need to be willing to follow myself, where my faith moves beyond that place where I have to understand, that place where I trust. The song we sang right before we went into this, you know, it's so good to be here, but we cannot remain. So if we must come down from that mountain, Jesus, go with us down into the plain. And, you know, I do trust. You know, there's lots of things that go on in life that I don't understand. There's lots of things that, both beautiful and horrible, that, you know, just defy my ability to kind of lock them in with words. But ultimately, there is that trust for me that, you know, whether I'm on the mountaintop or whether I'm in the valley, wherever it happens to be, I don't go alone. That God, the God who I come to know in Jesus Christ, goes with me. And sometimes I have my eyes open. Sometimes my eyes see things and I can sit there and I can just be amazed by the beauty that's around me, or by the grace of God that's been shown to me. Other times I walk around and I walk and don't fully understand. I walk and I have more questions than I have answers. And I know that part of that is my own limits, my own inability to see, my own blindness at times. But at least for me, it's faith that keeps me going even when I have more questions than I have answers. It's faith that keeps me going even when I don't see. Because I do trust that there are those moments where my eyes are opened. I do have those times where I've seen and been amazed by the beauty that's around me. And at those points where I'm not seeing them, I do need to be able to remember back. To remember again where God touched my life. where God opened my eyes, where God had me up on those mountaintop experiences when I walk in the midst of the valley and where I stumble and try to make my way through. At those times where my words don't do justice to that which I know, that which I experience, I trust that you kind of have some of that same experience as well. That you have those times where you don't know what words to put to it. But I do believe that, as we come together on a day like this, it's a day where it is beautiful and it's scary, it's terrifying, and it's amazing, and it's awesome, and it's all of those things put together. And I don't know that there's a word that describes it. And so perhaps merely it is a mystery. Perhaps that's really something that's worth spending the time and coming back every year to, knowing that, well, maybe we don't have the words. Maybe we still don't have the words. And yet we can sit, and we can be amazed, and we can wonder, and we can sit there and put ourselves in the place of Peter and James and John and say, well, what would we say in this? How would we go about trying to explain to someone else, even after Jesus' resurrection? How would we go about trying to explain to them what we saw on that day? And maybe that helps us to understand a little bit of how we explain to someone else, well, who is this God who we've come to know in Jesus Christ? And what does he mean to me? And maybe we don't get it all right, but we continue to journey like Peter and James and John do, searching for the words, but listening to the one who has come to be among us. Amen.